We have a quorum, so I call to order this meeting of the panel on security. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the policy briefing-cum-meeting on the 2nd of November have been forwarded to members. I haven't received any amendments so far. Can we confirm the minutes? All right, thank you. Item 2, information papers issued since the last meeting. We have a joint letter represented by Ms. Claudia MO and Mr. Nok-hin, and also the administration's information paper on its proposals to revise fees for services provided by the Immigration Department. The Secretariat already consulted members whether it is necessary to discuss this paper. As of the deadline imposed yesterday, we have not received any request from members to discuss the paper. I see Ms. Claudia MO has raised her hand. Yes, I believe Mr. Au would have something to say as well. About more than a week ago, we issued a letter about the administration's management of the Civic Square, and it is unconstitutional. I arrived early today to try to read the administration's response, which should have been tabled, but so far nothing has been said. Well, all along the administration has asked us to exercise tolerance, but this administration is irresponsible. It's just a very small square, and we have such a huge administration. If there is still mismanagement, I think it's 100% mismanagement. All right, your comment is noted. After the meeting, I will personally invite the Director of Administration to give you a response. Mr. Nok-hin, would we call it as soon as possible? Mr. Nok-hin, you've raised your hand. So far, the administration wing has not given the Legislative Council any response. Is it that right? I haven't seen the letter from the director. Well, then, of course, I also agree that they are acting outrageously because the court has already handed down the judgment, and I think the administration wing should revise the guidelines as soon as possible. And usually, the administration would give a response to say that they would give you a written reply as soon as possible, and the LegCo should be told about the reply. All right, I will follow up on the issue for both of you after the meeting. I understand that the Secretariat has also included this item on our agenda. So. But I'd like to also explain to you that the other side has an appeal period of 28 days. I don't know whether the 28-day period has lapsed. We'll wait and see. Well, Chairman, you should refrain from using some vague words. It hasn't been decided whether they would appeal. Well, it's up to them whether to appeal, but I need to make it clear that it is their right if they decide to appeal. I'm just saying that we are not saying no to discussing this item in our meeting. So that means after 28 days? Well, anyway, I'll follow up on it after the meeting. So if there is nothing else, let's move on to item 3. Date of the next meeting and items for discussion. The administration's proposed to discuss 3 items at the January meeting. First, an update on the comprehensive review of the strategy of handling non-refoulement claims, and that is a proposal to amend the immigration ordinance. The next item is to install electronic lock security system for Pig Oak Prison, and C, Government Flying Service Simulation Training Center. All right, if there is no objection, these will be the 3 items for discussion at the next meeting. Item 4, results of study of matters raised in the Annual Report 2017 to the Chief Executive by the Commissioner on Interception of Communications and Surveillance. Let's invite the administration to come in first. If you wish to speak on this subject, please raise your hand. I will first invite the Secretary to walk us through the paper, and then I'll throw the floor open for members. Well, as a matter of practice, we do invite the Commissioner on Interception of Communication and Surveillance, Mr. A.R. Salvai, to attend our meeting, but he has turned us down on the ground of inappropriateness. This morning, however, he already held a relevant press conference to give a briefing of the report, and the speaking notes that he used today have already been tabled for your reference. So in a minute, Secretary will, on his behalf, respond to members' questions. So, Secretary, if you're ready, please let me know. Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Southwhite, the Commissioner on Interception of Communications and Surveillance, submitted his third annual report in June this year to the Chief Executive to explain the implementation of the ICSO, the Interception and Communications Surveillance Ordinance, in the 2017. And as the Chairman explained this morning, he gave a briefing to the press. The objective of this bill is to strike a balance between the prevention of crime and intrusion on personal privacy and detection of crime. And in the whole investigation process is under close monitoring, and stringent requirements must have to be met. That is, the objective of the operation must be to prevent or detect crime, or to protect public security. And the proportionality principle should also be met. In 2016, in June, the ordinance was revised to empower the Commissioner with express powers in relation to interception of communications and covert surveillance. The Commissioner also explained his review work on protected products. In 9.12 of the report, on the whole, the Commission is satisfied with the performance of the law enforcement agencies and their officers in their compliance with the requirements of the ICSO in 2017. In para 9.4, the Commission is of the view that the LEA has continued to be vigilant and cautious in discharging their ICSO duties. And according to the Commissioner, the LEA is vigilant of the importance of LPP and JM materials. But in some cases, the Commissioner would ask the LEAs and the officers to stay more alert. And panel judges, in approving the prescribed authorizations or renew the prescribed authorizations, may impose additional conditions which would be effective in protecting an individual's rights to access legal advice. In such circumstances, the Commissioner has reminded LEAs that once the possibility of obtaining LPP and JM is heightened, then the panel judge should be notified. And there are different methods used to check whether they have followed the requirements. For example, including the weekly report submitted to the panel judges and the Office of the Commissioner, and also during site visits to LEA's offices, inspection of the records, and also protected products. And they include non-compliance, irregularity, incidents involving LPP and JM. Upon conducting reviews, the Commissioner did not find any case of non-compliance of the prescribed authorization or any surveillance devices used for non-ICSO purposes. In relation to the relevant incident reports in Chapter 6, the Commissioner opined that there were 18 cases of non-compliance, irregularity, and incident, but only one case involved non-compliance, and that's case 6.5 in the report. In this case, the LEA failed to report the alias of the subject serviced during interception, thereby breaching the code of practice, and it is an inadvertent mistake instead of a deliberate one. In terms of non-compliance, irregularity, incident cases, the Commissioner did not find that any of such cases involve deliberate departure from the requirements of the law. These were inadvertent mistakes. The Commissioner, however, noted that occasionally the officers were sometimes careless or inadvertently breached the regulations. So the LEAs have been reminded that during each stage of the operation, they should remain vigilant and cautious in discharging the duties. And the LEAs should step up training to help the officers discharge their duties under the relevant ordinance. Chapter 7 of the report involves recommendations made by the Commissioner to the head of law enforcement agencies. The administration accepts all the recommendations and they have also been implemented. Interception of communications and surveillance is very important in combating crime and maintaining public order in Hong Kong. During the report period, 170 persons were arrested under the ordinance through the operations carried out. In 2017, the surveillance unit has continued to be effective, and the Security Bureau will continue to work with all the relevant units to make sure that the relevant requirements are complied with under the ordinance.
I have Ms. Claudia MO, Mr. Nam Ting, Mr. Chen Zhenying, Nok-hin, Elizabeth Quat, and Dr. Cheng Jong Tai. I'm going to draw a line at 3 o'clock. Those upstairs, please come down straight away for the questions. 4 minutes each. Ms. Claudia MO. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to start with this report, Chapter 4, 4.45, 4.46. There is a case in which there was no assessment of the obtainment of journalistic materials, but in the course of it, they found this possibility, but the panel judge granted the approval with additional conditions. What conditions are there? The time, the venue, or the devices, or what? But the operation was terminated. I feel a little bit disturbed by this case. Now, for the recommendations of the Commissioner, the protection of JM should be on the same par as the LPP, and they should screen out the journalistic materials and do not make available the materials to the investigators. Now, these recommendations are not legally binding. They are merely recommendations. If they don't follow the recommendations, you can't do much about it. And also, we're dealing with the Customs and Excise, ICAC, the police, and these dedicated units, are they referring to the dedicated unit of these individual departments? Secretary, as regards the additional conditions under Section 58A, the panel judge can impose and alter the conditions. Normally, the panel judge would, having regard to the circumstances of the case, the background of the target, imposes certain conditions to protect the LPP and also the journalistic materials, as alluded to by Ms. Claudia MO. In his report, the Commissioner made the recommendations. We accept them in their entirety. Ms. Mo, I appreciate that. I'm asking about the additional conditions. What are they? Secretary? The Commissioner has already stated in the report what can be stated. What I'm talking about is from the report. What about the recommendations? Are they legally binding? Secretary, under the law, there is the code of practice. The code of practice is for everybody to follow. The Commissioner mentioned in Chapter 6 all these non-compliance, irregularity, and incident, and they cover all these, all that that wasn't done in accordance with the Code of Practice and the legislative provisions. So there are clear stipulations that the operation has to be undertaken in accordance with these provisions. Ms. Mo asked if the journalistic materials and LPP information is encountered, what's going to happen. Under the Code of Practice, there is stipulation. The investigators will have to hand over the materials to a dedicated group. Weekly report, I understand that. This dedicated group is independent of the investigations. What they are of the same kind. They are their own kind, aren't they? Well, please let the Secretary finish. These dedicated teams are there to make sure that the privileged information will be excised from the materials made available to the investigators. That this is in the COP. The privileged information will continue to enjoy protection. Ms. Mo. But the Code of Practice, like the recommendations, are not legally binding. Right, Mr. Lam Cheuk-ting. Chairman, when I served at the ICAC, I was involved in Type 1 and Type 2 surveillance activities. I fully appreciate that when the frontline officers are dealing with this, they're under tremendous pressure. They are worried that they may commit procedural errors and suffer severe consequences. Last year, during the reporting period, the Type 1, the number stood at 23 granted, Type 2, 7. This year, this is in line with my worries from last year, because last year's figures has dropped by 80% when the ordinance was introduced. This year, from 23 to 8 for Type 1, Type 2, 7 down to 3. If you make comparison with 2007, Mr. Secretary, 134 for Type 1, dropping down to 8, 94% decline. Type 2, 126 to 3, 97% drop. For these two types of surveillance, the enforcement action would be terribly important to the prevention or detection of crimes and protection of public safety. Why is it that we see such a tremendous drop? Is it because of the pressure on the front line? The more they do, and the more they do wrong, the less they do wrong. If they do nothing, they do nothing wrong. We don't have to discuss this report next year, maybe, because the number will be down to 0. If I may put this to Mr. Stephen Lam, Assistant Director. Now, for Type 1 and Type 2 surveillance activities, are the frontline staff facing huge pressure in such a way that they would choose not to make application for approval for these kind of surveillance? And will that compromise on the quality of the investigation? Mr. Stephen Lam. Chairman, whether we take advantage of the surveillance would depend on the circumstances of the case. All the applications will have to fulfill the stringent requirements under the law, and the purpose of an operation is there to prevent and detect crimes and the protection of public security, and we have to observe the rule of proportionality. So the number varies from year to year. the ICAC will not, for the sake of avoiding the governance of the law, seek not to make any application there. We will not, because of the pressure, choose not to do so. Mr. Lam, appreciate that. From 2007 to 2017, now all these serious crimes, corruption, bribery, and so on, have we seen 90% drop in these serious offences, in line with the drop in the percentage in the number of cases? Is Hong Kong enjoying such good law and order that we only have 6 to 7% serious crimes? Now, when I was serving in ICAC, I realized how much the pressure was. From time to time, we get issued warning letters. People tend not to make the application for approval because they're worried about making mistakes. Right, Secretary, the drop in the number of cases, has it got anything to do with the investigation methodology? Right, thanks very much for your concerns. I don't think we should be fixated on the figures alone. As I said, there are two conditions to be fulfilled. The first one is proportionality. Even if the number of cases remains the same, do we have to gather intelligence or evidence by means of this? If there are less intrusive methods to gather evidence, we would do so. We don't need this surveillance. Now, you mentioned the number of 8 for type 1 surveillance, but it doesn't mean to say that each year we're going to have a high figure. In 2012, for instance, we had only 6, lower than 8. 2013, it's gone up to 30 odd. I would say that the figures reflect the prevailing situation in the year, but if you take a snapshot and zero in on one single year, it may not be accurate. I know where Mr. Lam is coming from. We will monitor the situation and see how things evolve. Mr. Lam, the rate of decrease is absolutely alarming. 90% drop. It's not just a marginal decline. We have to face the reality. I think you ought to talk to the LEAs. Maybe they tried to avoid mistakes and avoid taking these appropriate measures to carry out the investigation. Mr. Chen Chen-ying? Chairman, the Commissioner on Interception of Communications and Surveillance mentioned in the report that there are officers who are unfamiliar with the law and the provisions, and there should be adequate training. There are 6 recommendations. The administration has accepted all of them. I'm sure that the administration will step up the training. Now, this covers the Customs and Excise, the police, the immigration, and the ICAC, and that they do have a lot of training courses. The Commissioner recommends more training. Will you put the legislative provisions in the training course, or will you restrict these to officers at a certain level, in particular those who have to deal with the ICSO duties? Second, over the past year, I noticed that the cases involving LPP the number has increased really dramatically. 7 were obtained inadvertently, and 71 were under application. Now, I know from the electoral paper that some occurred at the law firms, and some occurred at the places where surveillance is taking place. So will you consolidate our experience and instruct the officers to act carefully when they encounter this kind of situation? Secretary, thanks very much. Mr. Chen for the question. In terms of training, different discipline forces do attach importance to training, they do provide a whole host of training. All these legislative provisions are very stringent and complicated. So for those involved in the ICSO duties, they will be given specific training. They include those who are posted to these duties afresh, and they will be undergoing induction training. And when there are recommendations from the Commissioner and the departments concerned would like to make the officers aware, they will also be given clear instructions. Furthermore, they have a refresher training for the officers.
So perhaps after the induction training, after some period of time, they will be given refresher courses. For example, as to new guidelines issues, new procedures adopted, these officers will be reminded through the refresher courses. We also have seminars targeting different officers in terms of the difficulties they face in their line of work and experience sharing. And we also have workshops and internship opportunities. And the Commissioner also agreed that in January next year there will be a talk for law enforcement agency officers to share their observations and operational experience, so that he can personally share his views with the LEA officers. And the Commissioner has agreed to hold a session for us. Well, for the second part of the question, Chairman, I don't know whether you have time for the Secretary to give a brief response. Second point about LPP, I need to emphasize that first of all, in this report of the Commissioners or in the in this briefing session, he explained about the obtaining of LPP information inadvertently. These cases did not directly involve any solicitor or barrister, but rather a third party. This morning, in a briefing session, he made it clear that those were unexpected and unforeseen circumstances. Under the existing mechanism, risk assessments would have to be made by the relevant officers before carrying out such activities, or that when there is heightened likelihood, a report would have to be made. The Commissioner also explained that cases happened in 2017 did not involve such situations. So in terms of training, we also make it clear to officers that regardless of the circumstances, they are required to be as vigilant. As long as such risk emerges, a report should be made. And there should be full compliance with the conditions imposed by panel judges. So that's the focus of the training, and the Commissioner also agreed that we do take a vigilant and cautious approach. Mr. Nok-hin, I'd like to follow up on the issue of LPP, because this is right enshrined in the Basic Law. That is, information relating to LPP should not be obtained indiscriminately. So in this report, I think that we should really look into why there would be such cases, especially when the number of cases have increased by 1.5 times this year. So I wonder if the Security Bureau can explain to us specifically what measures you have. For example, for case 6.4, in fact, the Commissioner also explained that there was a heightened likelihood of obtaining LPP information. And obviously, the LEA officer failed to make a verbal report, so the fault was on them, and the officer in question received verbal warning only, and we're very concerned. About the importance of LPP, I'd like to have a response from the Security Bureau. Next, about the number of written applications on a decline. That's the trend, but my observation is that in 2014 we had 1,500 cases, and then the next year several hundred cases fewer. I wonder if the LEAs have resorted to other means in obtaining such information. Well, in the past, we would communicate through telephones, but nowadays we use social media and apps more often. So I wonder if these can be represented by some figures. But previously, when we scrutinized this bill in the Legislative Council, the administration explained that this definition is already wide enough in scope. There is no need to expand the definition. But nowadays we can make voice calls via WhatsApp. Does it mean that voice calls of WhatsApp would be falling outside the scope of this ordinance, and that you would only regulate for calls made by telephones? So is that a loophole? First question, figures. Second question, I wonder if we could ask the Commissioner whether, from his perspective, the law is still effective in protecting the LPP. Secretary. Mr. Au asked a number of questions. Let me try to take them, all the questions, albeit not in order. Let's refer to the Interception of Communications and Surveillance Ordinance. The ordinance contains clear definitions of what interception and surveillance means. First, Section 2 of the ordinance refers to any act of interception in relation to any form of communication, and then it also explains that in terms of any kind of communication, in the course of the delivery of post of telecommunications, the information is obtained not by the sender of the recipient of the communication process. So it explains what communication is and what interception of communications is. And the LEA's interception activities are based on the definition provided in the ordinance. And according to the Commissioner, he did not find any act committed outside the scope. But let me give you a brief response. Internet service provider, it is not captured. Is that right? And also the other point about the provisions I just read out, I think the definition is clear enough to answer Mr. Nok-hin's question. So that means it falls outside the scope. Do you need me to read it again? It's all right. Mr. Au, you shouldn't put words into the Secretary's mouth. Next point about LPP. I'd like to explain one point. In fact, the Commissioner also explained this point this morning in the briefing session. When this ordinance was enacted, we're fully aware of the LPP, and we also understand that this is a real risk when intercepting communications with LPP information. So the crux of the matter is on protecting the privacy of such LPP information. And when such risk is assessed to be likely, a report should be made to the panel judge, and the panel judge should impose conditions to make sure that LPP will be protected. And in the ordinance itself and the code of practice, we have made it clear that about handling of LPP information if it is obtained inadvertently, what the requirements should be. And when I answered Ms. Mo's question just now, I already explained that if such information is obtained inadvertently, the information should be passed on to a dedicated unit of the LEA such that such information will be withheld from the investigators in question. The Commissioner also raised another point in his report. For LPP cases in this report, all these cases related to heightened LPP likelihood. And the majority of cases involve the LEAs reporting the matter to the panel judges in their own initiatives. So, as the Commissioner explained, it showed the LEA's vigilance and caution towards such cases. Dr. Elizabeth Quat. And in this report, it is said that the relevant cases increased quite significantly in number, and 8 cases were found to involve the obtaining of LPP information. I understand that about the obtaining of information in these 8 cases, as explained, it was not carried out in the course of any communication between the subject and the lawyer. And rather, the information was obtained inadvertently, not deliberately. Well, we understand that in terms of interception of communication and surveillance activities, they are put under a microscope. So for LEA officers, they need to go through a lot of procedures, a lot of hurdles. So in the course of intercepting a piece of communication, if such information is inadvertently discovered, I could understand the pressure on the shoulders of the LEA officer and that there would be a whole lot of procedures to follow. So in terms of training and other procedures in the future, what can be done to help alleviate their pressure and help them fulfill their duties? And for 4.54 of the report, I noticed that when the Commissioner requested the LEA to give an explanation in 2 cases, the LEA replied that these 2 officers concerned had left the service and no record on the contents of the calls in question was documented, and the review was then concluded without further investigation. I want to ask whether it means if an officer leaves service, there will be no way to further the investigation in the absence of any record, and will this constitute any future breach of the law? And how can we prevent this from happening again? Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Quat, for her questions about LPP information's how it should be handled, and the LEA's vigilance. They take the matter very seriously, and they do have the relevant training courses. As I explained just now, when an officer is newly appointed to a post, there would be an induction course. And let me elaborate on the induction course. They would be taught to be familiarize with the system, and also in practice simulation or mock cases would be used to help them understand the requirements. They would also be taught the additional conditions imposed by panel judges and how they should fulfill their duties, bearing in mind these additional conditions regarding LPP and JM information, what it entails, and also in the event of an incident, seminars and briefing sessions will be held to explain to officers the relevant measures. Dr. Quat referred to a particular case because the officers concerned had left the service, but that's not really the main reason in this case. The case involved the time frame in 2011 and 2013, and I mean the two cases, whereas the amendment to the ordinance to give the Commissioner express powers to listen into the intercepted information, the amendment took place in 2016. So the Commissioner was referring to what happened several years before that. Having checked the records and having listened to the reports on certain information, the Commissioner decided not to pursue further. But the reason had nothing to do with the two officers having left the service. Because ultimately, if the Commissioner was to investigate the case, the two officers would be summoned back to give assistance. The point is, in 2017, if we had to take matters up from what happened in 2011 and 2013, of course, proper records should be kept. The other point is that if the officers were asked to answer some inquiries, the memories would fade, and because of inadequate proper record keeping at the time, that's the reason. And we have seen some improvements, and now we have more detailed and improved requirements on what should be put down in writing after listening to the relevant records. The point is, the memory had faded with the lapse of time, and the officers therefore could not really give some real assistance to help the Commissioner decide on how to pursue the matter. When deciding on the matter, the Commissioner did not find ill will on the part of the officers, so he decided not to pursue the investigation.
係，多謝主席。
Dr. Ching Chung Tai, Chairman. A few moments ago, the press briefing also referred to the LPP. They were not listening in to the LPP information of the lawyers. But it seems from the statistics that we ought to be vigilant. In 2015 report, those cases involving LPP, the number was 17. 2016, last year, 46. This year, 80. So the rate of increase, I hope that the statistics are correct. I get this information from the press. That we're talking about dramatic increase, 17, 46, 80. We're talking about a fourfold increase. Now, has the administration tried to find out about the circumstances in these cases? Were they involved? Did they involve the police, the ICAC, or what? Now, we are concerned that this might happen to individual discipline force, and this happened because of the lack of training and so on. Now, with this particular rate of increase, is it the case that these are isolated cases, or there is a general decline overall in the forces? Secretary, I'll explain further regarding the figures, but let me get a concept out of the way first. Now, these 86 cases are referred to in the report. These cases involving the information subject to LPP. We're basically talking about heightened likelihood of obtaining LPP information. Now, for those inadvertent obtaining of LPP information, the number stood at 8. The Commissioner also explained this in sufficient detail. So when we look at these figures, do they reflect the vigilance on the part of the officers, and they took the initiative to report to the panel judge about heightened likelihood of obtaining LPP information. Now, for these 86 cases, there were 8 cases involving inadvertent obtaining of LPP information. In other words, 80 of them didn't actually get access to the LPP information. The Commissioner explained in detail that other than the heightened awareness of the officers, and they took the initiative to make a report, and that contributed to the number of cases reported. If there is a case in which someone has been arrested in the surveillance operation, that may not be the subject of interception and surveillance. And in this case, the likelihood of obtaining LPP information will be heightened. It doesn't mean to say that the information has been accessed. Dr. Cheng, the Secretary referred to the actual figures. Last year, the number was 5. Still, we're talking about an increase. So has the administration tried to understand which LEA is mostly involved? Now that might give us some indication about the situation. Secretary, I think I was answering Dr. Cheng's question. Now for this ICSO operation, if an arrest has been made, it doesn't matter what LEA we're talking about. Now we talk about the police, the ICAC, immigration and customs and excise. If there are arrests made, those arrested may seek legal advice, and the likelihood of obtaining LPP information would be heightened as a result. So we're not talking about only one single department. It is across the board. As the Commissioner said, of the cases he examined, for those cases involving the obtainment of LPP information, it was done inadvertently. Now we fully appreciate that in this kind of operation, in Hong Kong and the world over, for that matter, there is a likelihood of LPP information being obtained. Now, in order to prevent and detect crimes, we have to strike a balance there. So we can tell from the figures that the LEA has been very stringent in reporting the cases, and we're observing all their requirements. Mr. Hon Chao, Chairman, in this report I noticed that there is a lot of mention about the heightened likelihood of obtaining LPP information, and the way in which this is dealt with leaves some room for improvement. There are a number of cases in the report after the judgment of the panel judge. They were considered to be inadvertent action. They didn't do it on purpose. Now maybe it is inadvertence, but there may be a lapse of judgment in terms of whether there is a need to make a report. Now, the Secretary explained that a case may involve various departments, and in some cases they heard about some suspects from other departments, and they have to make a report because the likelihood of obtaining LPP information might have been heightened. I know that there are some disciplinary actions. Are you going to step up education for the LEA officers? I know that they must have some certain level of awareness, but if you can ramp up the education and reinforce their ideas that would avoid any mistakes from being committed. Secretary, thanks very much, Mr. Chow. I'd like to make it abundantly clear that under the LPP, if during the operation it is quite inevitable, and if the information comes out in an inevitable situation, if it is intercepted during the operation, it is not against the law, it is not against the code of practice. It is for this reason that under the COP, there is a provision regarding how this is treated to make sure that the privileged information will continue to be protected. This is catered for in the COP. At this morning's briefing, the Commissioner said that however hard you try to guard against it, sometimes it would be quite inevitable. And I hope that you will appreciate this point. The Commissioner also mentioned in one particular case that the LEA officers would be erring on the side of caution when dealing with LPP information. Now that LEA wasn't quite sure whether it involved LPP, but since there was a likelihood of LPP information being involved, the LEA erred on the side of caution and follow the COP and all the procedures. Mr. Chow has got a point there. Education is important to make sure that officers would be acting cautiously. That much we will do. I have reported to members that in January this year, the Commissioner is kind enough to hold a seminar for the officers involved in ICSO duties and brief them on the details regarding the legislative provisions and also the requirements and his observations from all these cases. And that would enable the officers to have face-to-face interaction. Thank you. Mr. Dennis Kwok. Chairman, I noticed from the appendix that there are specific recommendations by the Commissioner to safeguard LPP information. I am a little bit worried about this. It is said that for LPP information, it should be put in a sealed envelope, and this is something that the minimum that the legal sector would be doing. Now, why is it that this is not being done? Why is it that you need a reminder from the Commissioner? If you're not doing even this minimum, and you need reminder from the Commissioner, I would be very worried about it. Secretary. Chairman, even before the recommendations are made, all these LPP information is privileged. And I can't stress enough this point. Now, when we submit an application to the panel judge, the LEA officer has to state the rationale and also assess the likelihood of obtaining LPP information in the process. Now, when the details are submitted, the officer has to submit his judgment and analysis and also the materials that would give rise to heightened likelihood of obtaining LPP information. And that would involve specific details of an operation that will be kept confidential. The Commissioner is of the view that the information will have to be submitted for those who are in charge of vetting this information in order to heighten the confidentiality. These will be sealed, put in a sealed envelope, and there is a restricted access to the sealed envelope, and that's the recommendation of the Commissioner. Mr. Kwok. During the interception of communications, if an officer hears a lawyer calling through, that's unexpected. Will the LEA stop the wiretapping straight away? And if they hear someone, let's say a simple example, if they hear a lawyer calling through, will they stop the intercept straight away? Secretary. Chairman, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Mr. Kwok. I'm afraid on a public occasion, I don't think I can go into minute detail about how the LPP information would be dealt with.
Regarding the conditions imposed by the panel judges, these conditions will be imposed under certain circumstances. Please allow me to finish. First of all, they would act in compliance with the conditions imposed by the panel judges. And regarding LPP information, we do not deliberately access such information. So in a way, I've answered Mr. Kwok's question. And the Commissioner referred to information obtained inadvertently. And as explained in this morning's briefing session, the information related to a third party, not a lawyer per se. And in such circumstances, we would immediately initiate the procedure to safeguard LPP. So I hope you understand that I cannot divulge too much details on this public occasion. I think on the whole, Mr. Kwok would not like to see the law being circumvented by major criminals. As I explained just now, as long as the operation involves any arrested person, it will be regarded as heightened likelihood and that the procedure will be initiated. We still have some time left. I'll allow Ms. Claudia MO to ask questions in the second round. 2 questions. Just a bit of comment. Just now, a fellow member had the law enforcement experience, and he asked about such a low number of cases. Well, but I'm from the media. I have a media background. Of course, I would hope that the number of cases should be kept to a minimum because it's invasion of privacy. Well, anyway, it is a balancing exercise. So it's just my comment. My question is whether it is possible to have figures from the 4 LEAs to see which one is doing the best, which one is the most non-compliant. And I understand we have the police, the Custom and Excise, Immigration Department, and ICAC. Can we give a league table as to how they fare? Secretary, I understand the member's point, but there are stipulations in the law about what information should be included in the report, what figures to be included, and of course the report should be as transparent as possible, containing as many details as possible. But we need to make sure at the same time that the LEA's effort in combating crime will not be compromised. Chapter 5 therefore sets out details of the report, and we need to follow the provisions in the ordinance. My understanding is that it may not be a breach of the law because if we have competition, we will have improvement. Let's say if the police is doing the best and the immigration is the worst, then that's an incentive for the Immigration Department to work harder so that it will score better in the next report. Can't we do that? Secretary, perhaps Ms. Mo did not pay careful attention to this point. In fact, in the Commission's concluding remarks, he expressed gratitude to all the bureaus and LEAs and the head of departments for the cooperation and assistance. So all of them would, all of the heads would properly supervise their department in following the requirements. All right, that wraps up the discussion of this item. Next, construction of immigration headquarters in Cheung Kwan O. Members who would like to speak, please raise your hand. We have Mr. Sunny Au, Undersecretary for Security, Ms. Winnie Choi, PAS for Security, and Mr. Law Chen Nam, Acting Director of Immigration, as well as the relevant public officers from the Immigration Department and the Architectural Services Department. Once they're seated, I will invite them to walk us through the paper, and then members will be given the opportunity to ask questions. We have Dr. Elizabeth Kwat, Mr. Ray Chan, Mr. Holden Chow, and also Mr. Peter Shiu. If there is no objection, Mr. Shiu would like to go first. Have a go first. All right. Well, you'll be the first to ask questions, but let's hear from the Undersecretary first. He will brief us on the paper. Perhaps he can be brief because I suppose all members have diligently read the paper before they came to the meeting. Are you ready, Undersecretary? Well, to make way for the development of convention and exhibition facilities, hotel facilities, and Grade 8 office space, the government has decided to relocate the Wan Chai government offices compound comprising Immigration Tower, Revenue Tower, and the Wan Chai Tower to Area 67 of Cheung Kwan O. This project is located in the central part of Cheung Kwan O. It is convenient, and the new area would be provided for relocating the Immigration Tower, as well as the office and as well as the saving costs for renting office premises for the Immigration Department Center, and also to enhance command and control functions. And we also have public-oriented offices in the new tower. We also have telephone hotline centers and operational facilities for the issuance of ID card and other documents. We have consulted the Sai Kung District Council and obtained support from the District Council. In terms of the tendering process and the assessment of tender, they have all been completed, subject to members' support. It is estimated that works can commence in the second quarter of 2019 for completion in the third quarter of 2023. The estimated cost is $6.8 billion in the MOD prices. I urge members to support the project so that we can submit the funding proposal to PWSC and FC as soon as possible. Mr. Law from Immigration Department and Mr. Wong, Project Director from ASC, and myself would be happy to take questions from members. Before members speak, may I remind members that in accordance with Rule 83A, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to the project, please disclose the nature of the interest before you speak. Mr. Peter Shiu, 4 minutes each. First of all, I thank my fellow members for allowing me to jump the queue because I will be meeting some students very soon. So I support the relocation of the immigration headquarters to Cheung Kwan O. I hope that it can be done as soon as possible, especially as we know that the Immigration Department is expanding its establishment with the commissioning of border checkpoints and also Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. I understand that the establishment will continue to expand, and we also need a lot of space to deal with the non-refoulement claimants. We need office space for the immigration officers. So if the Hon Chai headquarters are relocated to Tseung Kwan O, along with other government departments, they can form a cluster. And over the past decade or so, as experience tells us, delays in projects would mean escalation in costs. So if we could implement the project as soon as possible, it would help save public money. So in terms of your relocation plan for the immigration headquarters in Tseung Kwan O, I want to know whether there is anything that departs from your expectation. Under Secretary, I thank Mr. Shiu for supporting our project. Everything is in accordance with our plan, including the time frame. Our next step would be to obtain the electrical support. After that, we can send out a tender invitation, and perhaps Mr. Law can give you more details, or perhaps Mr. Wong can supplement my answer in relation to the works. Yes, Mr. Law, we're still in the course of preparation. Well, I think the design of the headquarters is based on our existing operation, and we still have have a few years, and we're still at the planning stage. So far, we have not encountered any major problems. We would like to talk about building and construction, Mr. Wong. Well, I think the next step is that the schematic design will take place, and we'll discuss with the Immigration Department on design details, and then it will be implemented. Mr. Shiu, every morning I know that there will be long queues outside the Hon Chai headquarters, and I understand that your staff have been very effective in maintaining order. Now, Hon Chai is not a residential neighborhood, but in Tseung Kwan O, in future, I understand that some local residents are concerned whether in the future the long queues would affect the residential neighborhood, and also whether non-refoulement claimants will gather there. So in terms of security and maintaining order, I hope that the order can be maintained like what you're doing in Hon Chai to minimize the impact on residential neighborhood. I support the proposal. Please note his comment. Under Secretary. Yes, we note Mr. Shiu's comment. Next, Dr. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you, Chairman. The DAB also supports this proposal because indeed the location is convenient. We believe the Immigration Department's service quality will be enhanced. But we do anticipate many immigration officers are going to work in Tseung Kwan O. There would also be a lot of members of the public and tourists visiting the headquarters. Have you made any estimate? Now, in the paper you referred to the MTR. I wonder whether other means of transport are sufficient, such as buses, and also district councillors have repeatedly mentioned that there isn't sufficient parking. I understand that there would be public parking spaces. How many exactly are there? And I wonder whether you would increase the number of parking spaces for the public, apart from parking spaces for the Immigration Department staff and the visitors. Could you increase parking spaces to help resolve the problem in the neighborhood? And about the path from the MTR station to the immigration headquarters, at the moment it is not covered. Will you explore the option of providing covered walkways, such as a tunnel, a footbridge, or a covered walkway? Thank you, Chairman. Under Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Quat. I thank Dr. Quat for supporting the project. Let me explain about the flow of people and also public car park, and covered walkway. These points, I think I'll defer to Mr. Wong. Now, after the headquarters are relocated to Changquan-o, there will be around 3,000 staff members working in the headquarters. And then on a daily basis, there would be around 6,000 members of the public accessing our public service in Changquan-o. And with development in e-service, we will keep in view whether the flow of people there would decrease. About the capacity of MTRCL, it has a capacity of 65,000 every day, so we only account for a very small number comparing to that. And for our officers attending work and visitors, they may use different means of transport. There won't be a conflict. Previously, we also commissioned an expert to conduct an assessment. And according to the TIA, there won't be any adverse impact as far as the relocation is concerned.
Yes, the walkway. This is pretty close to the MTR station. It is close to both the Zhengguanlou station and Tukingling station. From Zhengguanlou station, it would take 5 minutes to walk to the immigration headquarters. Coming from the other direction, Tukingling station, people can use the walkway past the Ivy and also the stadium and another pedestrian walkway, and through this they can gain entrance to the immigration headquarters. And also from the Zhengguanlou station, people can cross at grade, and they can gain access through the open space there, and also they can take advantage of the covered walkway near the residential development. What about the car parking spaces? Yes, the parking facilities in Area 67, the administration will be looking at this together with the joint use building. The GPA is looking at this, and they are aware of the demand for parking spaces. So in this joint use building, there will be parking spaces provided. How many parking spaces will be considered? I don't have the information, but we're talking about 100, more than 100. Well, you might wish to make available the information before this goes to the PWSC. Mr. Ray Chan, Chairman. This paper is entitled Construction of Immigration Headquarters in Zhengguanlou. They're seeking $6.8 billion for this purpose. If we support this, then we'll be supporting the demolition of the 3 government towers in Wan Chai and make the site available for convention exhibition facilities, hotel facilities, and Grade A office space. Now, this is a whole package. We're not here to debate whether we should pull down the 3 towers to make way for the facilities, but I'm sure that the debate will continue at the PWSC. Some members raised doubt about the idea of pulling down the 3 towers. From the practical point of view, environmental point of view, do we have to demolish them to make way for convention exhibition facilities? I'm not sure this is within the purview of the Immigration Department. I'm sure that they need to have the information at the PWSC. With the relocation, how much better off will this be? How much better off in terms of service provision for the members of the public? In this new headquarters, in terms of office space, net office space, net operational floor area, how much better off will you be? Other than Wan Chai, there are other offices in leased premises that will also be moved to these headquarters. So for this new headquarters, how much more are you going to have for NOFA? Now you have the indoor fire range. That's an added portion for sure, but in terms of NOFA, how much more are we talking about? The paper is rather simple. You don't even have a 3D diagram. In parent 9, there will be a self-service station. Even after office hours, people can also avail themselves of the self-service station. If they can use the self-service station anytime they like, can the stations be made available to other immigration officers? And what sort of self-service are we talking about? Undersecretary, thanks very much. Mr. Chen's got a number of questions. Let's answer them one by one. Mr. Chen asked about this relocation to Zhongguanou. I don't think there is any direct link with the demolition of the 3 towers in Wan Chai. Perhaps Mr. Chen wishes to supplement. Mr. Chen also asked about the self-service station and how much better off people are after the relocation. I defer to Mr. Law. And the net operational floor area, we're going to have 57,400 square meters. At the moment, it is 49,000. That includes the Wan Chai headquarters and also the leased accommodation. We're going to have an additional 8,000 square meters. In terms of public offices, we have an additional 3,000 square meters, or 20-odd%. At the moment, the working environment is rather crammed, and we will have more space with the relocation. Mr. Law, Acting Director. Chairman, thank you. Now for the Wan Chai headquarters, it is 33,000 square meters. The headquarters are rather crammed, and like Mr. Xu said, we have more manpower and we have more officers. And if you've been there, you can tell that it is rather cramped. For the new headquarters, it is more spacious, and we have more floor area. At the moment, we have at least 15,800 square meters of leased accommodation. In future, they will be merged into the headquarters. In terms of operational efficiency, it is not as good as if the offices are merged, are put together under one roof. What about the 3 towers? The government has decided to develop the site in Wan Chai into convention exhibition facilities, hotel, and Grade A office space. And the immigration department will be moved to the Zhongguanou headquarters. The administration will brief members on the situation regarding the Wan Chai site. Mr. Holden Chow, Chairman. For these immigration headquarters, we'd like to have better service and more spacious accommodation. I've got a couple of questions here. Like Dr. Kwok said, the Zhongguanou residents do have a keen demand for public parking spaces. You don't have the information now. I hope that you would make it available at the PWSC. Here in this headquarters and also in the joint use building, how many parking spaces will become available? At least there should be more than 100. I hope that you would supplement the information later on. Second, this immigration headquarters will substitute the Wan Chai Tower, which will be demolished. According to the paper, work will get underway in Q2 2019 for completion in Q3 2023. So I think it's only when the headquarters are ready for occupation before the Wan Chai town will be pulled down. I'd like to see confirmation there. Third, the paper is silent on specific details like the height of the building and so on. In 2015, you attended the district council meeting and you heard comments regarding the height of the building. If you have further information, please let us have it at the PWSC. Mr. Wong? Chairman, if I may. Address parking first. At the Zhongguanou Joint Use Building, there is an arrangement to provide 100 or so parking spaces for coaches and lorries. That's for public use. The GPA is considering providing more spaces for private cars, and we will make the information available at the PWSC meeting. The height of the building, now we have one basement plus 18 stories. When we took the project to the district council for consultation, the TPP granted 97 MPD. However, we don't really want to affect the nearby residents, so we are reducing this from 97 to 90 MPD. Mr. Chow? No. Mr. Poon Siu-ping. Chairman, thank you. I support this project in principle. Like members, I am also concerned about the traffic situation. According to the administration, there are 3,000 civil servants working there, and there will be 6,000 or so members of the public turning up. The MTR has a capacity of 65,000. The number of people turning up there would be something like 10,000. In Area 67, there are many GIC sites where they will be built on. I'm not sure how many people will end up being there. I'm sure that there will be an impact on the traffic situation. According to the administration, the consultant returned a positive findings. Now this covers 57,400 square meters in terms of net operational floor area. There will be parking spaces for the departments. In terms of design, how many parking spaces are there for the department? Second, in terms of traffic flow, other than MTR service, I hope that you would step up other means of transport. With the building completed, I'm sure that there will be a lot of people going there. And this is taking us to the third quarter of 2023. In this area, will some of the services not be available there that are available in Wan Chai currently? Under Secretary, thanks very much for your support, Mr. Poon. The officers, now we have 70 parking spaces at the moment for Wan Chai and also for the leased premises. And in this Zhongguanou headquarters, we will maintain the number at 70. Mr. Poon expressed concerns about the traffic flow and the burden on the traffic situation. We told members about the consultant's report, and I understand that the Immigration Department will launch electronic services. Members of the public don't really have to turn up at Zhongguanou for processing their documents, and there will be transport link for Zhongguanou. Now we're going to have the Zhongguanou Lam Tin Tunnel, and also a link road in the Bay Area, and that would help ease the traffic, in particular traffic from West Kowloon. In terms of services, I understand that the Wan Chai, the services available in Wan Chai will be moved to Tseung Kwan O. Perhaps Mr. Law can supplement. With the relocation from Wan Chai to Tseung Kwan O, we will identify offices on Hong Kong Island. The services available in Hong Kong Island will not be undermined, and we will make an announcement in future. So that will cater for the 2023 arrangement. Mr. Nok-hin, Chairman.
Chairman, this project may not relate to the relocation of the revenue tower. It may be part of the relocation of Wan Chai Government Office's compound. But relocating the compound to make way for the development of convention and exhibition facilities and grade 8 office space, I don't think is environmentally friendly. To take down a building of about 20 years of age, I think that the public would have a lot to say about this. Now, I'd like to ask for more information. I don't know whether this is to be answered by the ASD or the Development Bureau. Can you explain about the relocation of the 9 buildings, including the revenue tower of the Wan Chai Government Office's compound? Where will all of them be relocated? Because the more we ask, the more we then know about the details of relocation. Now, can you give us a written reply as to the relocation of the 9 blocks of building and about the calculation of costs? Because for the 9 buildings, well, 4 of them have been covered, and we have this one under this project. And for the remaining 4, we're still unsure about the costs involved. Well, I don't know what you're referring to. 9 buildings. We have the 3 towers here. Relocating the 3 towers. The revenue towers will be relocated under the whole project. Perhaps you can give me a written reply after the meeting. Let me refer back to the immigration headquarters. Because for Tseung Kwan O Station, I understand that the footbridge would be built to link it up to the wings, and there will be more parking spaces. Now, about the footbridge connecting to shopping malls, first of all, will there be round-the-clock access? And second question about parking spaces, would there be any restriction on its use, or would it be available to everyone? So 2 questions. Under Secretary, do you understand what 9 blocks of tower he is referring to? Perhaps the reprovisioning of the 3 towers in Wan Chai to be relocated to the 9 different buildings in various districts? Yes. Let me discuss with the relevant departments and bureaus and see if we have information about the question of footbridge and parking. Let me defer to Mr. Wong. I refer to the footbridge planned under the EST. It will be completed in 2019 first quarter. There will be round-the-clock access for pedestrians as for connection with the wings. An opening has been preserved, and for the civic center next to it, once it is developed, we will consider linking the buildings with the footbridge. Parking spaces. We hope to increase parking spaces for private cars. We don't have any special conditions on users. Another question, 6,500 people will be using this headquarters according to your estimation. How much traffic will be generated? Although you mentioned the TIA and the use of electronic services to reduce the flow of people, I do hope you will have relevant measures to tackle the problem. Next, Mr. Van Chan. Just now, Undersecretary mentioned that 70 spaces would be provided in addition to the existing parking available in Wan Chai. That means that there will be 70 parking spaces for departmental use. I'm quite concerned. In Wan Chai, it is more accessible, and if the headquarters are relocated in Chuan Kwan-o, and if you only provide 70 spaces identical to what you have at the moment, I think it's too conservative. It may not be conducive to improving your operation in the future. So I hope you will review the figures and see if you can increase the parking spaces. Next, at the moment, we see a lot of cars illegally parked, different kinds of vehicles, in fact, illegally parked along the streets nearby. So more parking spaces will be necessary, including spaces for larger vehicles and for private cars. Because it's close to the MTR station, it will be better even if we can have some kind of park and ride program. All in all, I support the proposal. My question is about the services currently provided in Wan Chai and the vicinity, very much welcomed by local residents. I wonder if these services will be maintained. I will follow up on Mr. Chan's questions about more parking spaces. I will invite the ASD to look into that without affecting the overall design, how we can increase parking spaces. About services currently available in Wan Chai, how we should continue to provide such services in Wan Chai. Well, Mr. Law, in fact, you've answered this question already. Well, even after relocation in Chuan Kwan-o, the Hong Kong Island office will still be in operation to make sure the service will not be disrupted. Parking spaces. We'll discuss with the relevant department to see whether we can have two-tier parking system and increase parking spaces in the building. We'll discuss with the immigration department. Well, I think if you are to discuss with the ASD about the spaces for departmental use, I strongly suggest that you should provide more than just 70. They've already agreed to provide a specific figure at the next PWSC meeting. Any follow-up? No? Dr. Fernando Zhang. Chairman. Mr. Nok-hin just now referred to 9 new buildings in relation to the relocation program as a whole, and we started discussion 10 years ago, meaning that the 3 towers currently in Wan Chai will be reprovisioned to 9 different buildings in different districts. This is a very important concept because it is a major relocation exercise away from Wan Chai. I'm not going to repeat the personnel and the departments involved, but because of the way it is done in a formatted manner, we're not sure about the details. For example, when will all these 9 buildings be completed? The costs involved. And because of different demolition schedules, the time of completion of different buildings may not be the same, and the government departments may need to lease properties elsewhere for some time. I understand that these 3 towers were only built some 30 years ago. They, on the face of it, do not look dilapidated. These are important commercial properties, and frankly, it is not very environmentally friendly to just take them down. And because of the huge public money involved, I question whether it is really necessary. Now, about relocating immigration headquarters to Chuan Kwan-o, it may not be a bad deed. And I do agree that for major government departments, such as the Immigration Department, the farther it is relocated, the better. It should be relocated to an area where there are few job opportunities so as to create jobs and help local economy there. I don't think the public officers have been able to answer our question today. I hope that before the proposal is submitted to the PWSC, you will give us a holistic picture of the Wan Chai government offices compound relocation plan. And about relocating the offices from these 3 towers, I wonder if these 3 towers must be demolished so that the site can be developed into office space again. In fact, the government is renting a lot of commercial properties. At the moment, we pay $1 or $2 billion a year on rental. So for departments that must be situated in the CBDs, instead of renting private commercial properties, can they move in and make use of these 3 towers? I don't think these public officers will be able to answer my question. But before you submit the proposal to PWSC, would you give us a written reply? Have you conducted any assessment on the efficiency? Because these are very good buildings. They should not go to waste. Under Secretary, would you try to answer his questions? Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Zhang. About the 3 existing towers and the 9 new buildings, you're partly right. Now let's just focus on relocation of immigration towers. Immigration headquarters from Wan Chai to Tseung Kwan O. The whole plan also includes other offices being provisioned and relocated to Tseung Kwan O in an integrated manner. Some of the offices are currently on leased properties, and we'll be able to save some $40 million of costs. And for the new headquarters, there would also be extra space for public-oriented services and public-oriented space. It's a win-win. So after relocation, it will be better coordinated, and the department will have higher efficiency. So I'll liaise with the relevant departments and see what more information we can provide. Yes, please do. I think the information is very important. Please also give us information relating to the offices in these 3 towers. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-chuen. Thank you, Chairman. About this plan, I support it. This tower isn't the first one. I think the administration also briefed us on the remaining 2 towers before. I'm just quite surprised that the tower will be relocated to Tseung Kwan O in Sai Kung District. Because for a resident living in Yuen Long, it's really a long journey to get access to your service. I'm not talking about arrestees. They won't mind riding a long journey. Anyway, I support your project, but at the same time, I do have some doubts. Now, you're going to maintain some important services that you currently provide, and setting aside law enforcement, you have other services such as travel documents, also for talent admission, travel document, tourist visa, ID documentation, etc. So the public would need to attend to headquarters to process these documents. I think we need to give some time for the public to familiarize themselves with Tseung Kwan O. Although Sai Kung District Council supported your plan because it would help boost the local economy and bring jobs in, I think the administration should be careful in whether it is the most appropriate location for providing such important government services. And I also agree with Mr. Chan's point on traffic and transport. And it's a very good location between two MTR stations. I don't know how much we have to walk on foot from the MTR station. Well, anyway, I checked Google Maps, and at grade, it takes quite a long journey on foot. I don't know whether all of your colleagues have good physique, because for the average Joe like me, I find it difficult to even cross the road. Well, will it be a long journey for your staff members? Because you only have 70 parking spaces. And I don't know whether the 70 parking spaces include public or government vehicles for, say, arrest operations. If you have too few parking spaces for visitors, will it undermine your department's operation? Well, Undersecretary already said that you would go back and review the situation. Please do, and do it in a comprehensive manner. In general, Hong Kong is short of parking spaces. If you don't even have sufficient parking for departmental use, it will be a major problem, because next to it you have a private housing estate, and each parking space costs several $1 million. And if you do not provide sufficient parking spaces, you'll be paying a huge sum of money for rental.
Undersecretary, thanks very much, Mr. Leung. Now, this location is right at the heart of Tseung Kwan O area. It's halfway between Tu Keng Ling and Tseung Kwan O, 7 minutes or 9 minutes from either direction. And the traffic arrangement would definitely be improved. And there will be the Tseung Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel, and there will also be a link at the bay. And Route 6 will also become available together with the rail link. It is highly accessible. We also have electronic services becoming more readily available, and people don't really have to turn up physically. And this will be commissioned in 2023, and the e-service will be available in time for that. Parking, we're aware of that. Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Law, will you tell us whether local district officers will still be available, and Mr. Leung doesn't have to travel all the way from Yuen Long? On Hong Kong Island and Kowloon, we still have the officers available. Like the Undersecretary said, in 2021, we're going to have a new system. People can make application online or on their mobile devices. Mr. Leung, you have to find your way around ahead of time. Mr. Tony J. Chairman, thank you. Paragraph 2 of the paper refers to the relocation of government offices out of high-value areas, and overall, how we're going to make maximum use of Hon Chai. I support the major direction. Like Mr. Leung Chi-chuen said, we have to have regard to the services available to the public. If we have all the services focused on one location, it may not be as accessible. I fully appreciate that technology is really moving ahead. We don't have to turn up physically, but many times we still have to turn up physically for some of the services. I don't really want to belabor this point, though. Chairman, it is a matter of principle whether we support this project. I think I have stated my stance. As regards the nitty-gritty of the project, the administration might say that we can leave it to the PWSC. I understand that, but I still like to seek more information. This is a design and build project, I'm not sure whether this question was asked before, what's the advantage of design and build approach? What criteria do you adopt to pick this approach? Now, this is a headquarters for a lot of civilian staff. Why do you have to adopt this design and build approach? Second, you said you would make available more detailed information later on, but here at the panel, I would expect some more information, although they have given us some of the uses, but I'm sure that you must have a design brief. At least I would expect that you make available these kind of information. You have told us what services will be available, but I don't think that these are the fundamental scheduled. This is going to cost us $6.8 billion. Why $6.8 billion? Are there any specific requirements that cost us so much? Or is it more like the level of costs that will be incurred for government buildings? Now, for the net operational floor area, it's going to be 60,000 square meters. Why does it cost us $6.8 billion? Undersecretary? Chairman, I defer to Mr. Wong to address Mr. Jay's question. Design and build approach and the idea behind the construction and the price tag of $6.8 billion for 57,000 square meters floor area. Mr. Wong. The ASD will look at the nature, the scope, and the requirements, and also the allocation of resources, and pick the right approach. We picked this approach because we'd like to shorten the time, the duration. Because if we use the consultancy approach, it's going to take us 6 months more. And in a detailed design, we can take advantage of the foundation work period for us to do the detailed design, and that will shorten the duration of construction. Now, there is the security block and also a main block. These two blocks are 18 stories high. Of the 9 stories, there are some floors that would be open to the public, and there will be north and south wings. They will be linked up with a walkway system, and there will be operational efficiency from that, and the ventilation is much better that way. We will go into greater detail when it comes to the PWSC. Chairman, at least we should be given a design brief. Of course, you can do so at the PWSC. The paper is very simple. It's not a question of whether we support the relocation. Also, the Project Management Coordination Office, the PMCO, what role is the PMCO play in terms of the cost management? Mr. Wong? Now, this is going to cost us $6.8 billion. We have, in fact, liaised with the PMCO in terms of the initial projection. They do monitor the situation, and they do come back to us on this. And we have regard to the requirements of the Immigration Department. Of course, we have to do it through the GPA and also the relevant department when it comes to the total size of the building. I haven't heard an objection to this being submitted to the PWSC. So this paper will go to the PWSC, and I urge the officials to make available the information sought by members. I heard from Mr. Tony J. a request. Mr. Wong, you might wish to liaise with Mr. J after the meeting. Yes, indeed, we can make it available to the Secretariat for onward submission to Mr. J. Right, item 6, I need to extend the meeting by 15 more minutes. The next item is the proposed amendments to the first schedule to the Dangerous Drugs Ordinance. With us for this item Ms. Amanda Chen, Commissioner for Narcotics, Mr. Nok-hin Chief Pharmacist, Mr. Kevin Lai, Principal Assistant Secretary. We also have the Customs or the Police and Customs and Excise representatives. Members who wish to speak, please raise their hands. Yes, Commissioner, please. Chairman, this is to propose 5 different substances: acryloyl fentanyl, fentanyl, 5-FMD-MB pinaca, or fentanyl and TFF, to bring them under control in the first schedule. According to the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence of the WHO, the first 4 are derivatives of fentanyl. It would give rise to adverse effects like meiosis, decreased consciousness, psychosis, and so on. As to 5-FMDMB pinaca, it is a synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonist. The side effects would include relaxation, euphoria, lethargy, depersonalization, distorted perception of time, impaired motor performance, hallucinations, and so on. This has caused fatalities in Europe and Japan. In Hong Kong, we don't have any recognized medicine use and no registered pharmaceutical product containing this. In March, the UN Commission on Narcotics Drugs decided to bring these under international control. Since they have adverse effects, we'd like to propose that this be brought under Part 1 of the first schedule. We have consulted the ACAN and also the trade, the Pharmacy and Poisons trade, and we gained their support, and we will introduce these to the Council by negative vetting. Mr. Chen Zhenying, 4 minutes. Chairman, thank you. For these 5 substances, I can't really roll my tongue around them. There's something like fentanyl. I learned about the analgesic property of fentanyl. It is many times over morphine. And we also have the 5-FMDMB pinaca. I don't know anything about it. Now, is the government aware of any abuse of these substances in Hong Kong? You're going to bring this under the law. Have you seen any abuses? If there are abuses and we don't have any law for that, for those who are selling these substances, is there anything that we can do about them? Second, about the time frame for legislation. It was in March this year that at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs that the member states adopted the recommendation to place them under international control. The government is going to introduce the instruments by negative vetting. I get a feeling that this will not be done until next year. So the UN has brought this under control. To the time we bring this under our control, it would take about a year. What about other jurisdictions when the UN has brought this under control? How long did they take them to introduce the relevant legislation? 1 year in Hong Kong. What about other jurisdictions? Now, are we moving at normal speed, or are we moving ahead, or are we moving too slowly in this regard? Right. Thanks very much, Mr. Chen. Abuses of these 5 substances. In fact, the ACAN and the law enforcement agencies have been monitoring the abuses. Now we have the registrar statistics. We also have some drug treatment center experience, and we also have the enforcement work of the customs and excise and the police. We haven't seen any abuses of these 5 substances in Hong Kong over the years. As regards the legislative timetable, we mentioned the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs. There are 180 member states, and they are introducing this into their code, and the speed varies between countries. And take this THFF, for instance, in the US and Canada. They have done that. Belgium, Germany, they haven't quite done it.
Now, regarding Hong Kong's circumstances, after the UN resolution has been passed, we need to go through a set of procedures. The expert committees and the law LEAs will need to give information about the situation in Hong Kong, whether there is any abuse of the 5 substances, the concerns. Second, we need to consult the relevant sectors. For example, the dangerous drugs ordinance, and also the licensees under the pharmacy and poisons regulations. They may have experience in dealing with these substances, and we have not received any objection in our consultation with the trade. We also need to consult the narcotics department, and they are represented by doctors and professionals, and they may have views on the matter. And finally, we come to the panel to consult members' views. Once all these are completed, subsidiary legislation would be submitted to the Chief Executive in Council for approval, followed by the vetting procedure in LegCo. So all these take time. What about our progress? Well, last time we had a similar legislative amendments. Comparing to last time, we made a much quicker progress. Last time we submitted the proposal to the panel in February. This time we come earlier in December. And in fact, we have advanced our work by a whole quarter. We want to make sure that even before there is abuse in Hong Kong, we can take preventive measures. Ms. Chan, can you also tell Mr. Chan that whether it is a breach of the law, if there is abuse at the moment, although it is not yet included in the DDO. Taking of these drugs would not amount to an offense because they have yet to be included in the DDO, whereas for import, export of these drugs, they would be subject to the Import and Export Ordinance. Once these substances are exported or imported, they will be required to submit the relevant documents. If the documents show information inconsistent with the content, the CNE can then take enforcement action. All right, very clear. I don't see that we have any questions from members, so this item is concluded. Thank you. Next item, AOB. Nothing under AOB. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.